If you found yourself surrounded by the most powerful people in Europe, and the entire room looked at you like you were trash, what would you do? Walk away in silence, or quietly wait for the perfect moment, when the whole world would be forced to bow to the very name they once mocked. That evening, at the most prestigious gala hosted by the Morgan Trust financial empire, a young woman in a nameless satin dress, wearing flats, her hair tied in a low ponytail, was ridiculed as if she were a lost waitress. But no one knew that just hours later, she would inherit an $80 billion empire, and those who once raised their glasses in mockery would lower their heads to sign a plea for survival in the very ecosystem she now ruled. What would you do if every gaze in a room of power looked at you as if you were a mistake? At the Glass Vault, the building hailed as the invisible heart of Wall Street, the most powerful figures in America were raising their glasses beneath chandeliers hanging from a 14-meter-high ceiling. Floor-length couture gowns, diamond-studded timepieces, and the murmurs of investors filled the air, thick with the scent of money and bloodlines. And then she walked in, a young woman in an ivory satin dress, unbranded, no metallic trimming, no shimmering embellishment except for a gaze soft enough to disarm. Her hair was tied low, flats on her feet, no necklace, no designer handbag. For a split second, the entire hall paused. Beatrix Langford, heiress to a global tech conglomerate, narrowed her eyes and tilted her head toward her friend. Spring collection from the Salvation Army? Laughter rippled across the room, subtle, but sharp enough to chill the spine of the newcomer. No one knew who she was. No one cared. In a room where every name was a brand, anonymity was the gravest sin. Elena kept walking, gently, slowly. Each step was a collision with the thick fog of prejudice that hung like cold smoke in the ballroom. She moved toward the central table, the one reserved for the biggest stakeholders in the world of private finance. Every glance scanned her like a misfiled document, trying to decide if a staff member had lost her way. A man, a real estate investor from Dubai, smirked and muttered, maybe they should put up clearer signs for the staff entrance. Laughter erupted, soft, but sharp enough to offer the comfort of shared disdain. A waiter in a black tuxedo approached, carefully setting a glass of wine on the table beside Elena, then whispered with an indifferent face, "Ma'am, the entrance for event staff is around the back." Elena said nothing. She simply adjusted the white sash tied across her waist, the only modest symbol marking her as someone who did, in fact, belong. But who cared? Beatrix Langford turned again, this time not bothering to whisper. Probably someone's temporary girlfriend. These parties always need a little entertainment. Her voice rang just loud enough for the entire table to burst into laughter, and the internal live stream cameras caught every word. Elsewhere, halfway across the world, a frail man sat in front of a screen. His eyes never left the image of his daughter. His fingers clenched an old, faded photograph. His heart slowed, as if every word they said was a blade cutting into his chest. The jokes were no longer whispers. They became sentences. Phones were pulled out. Lenses zoomed in on Elena, as if she were some exotic creature in an elite zoo. The internal live stream broadcast the scene to countless financial offices across the globe. And somewhere, in a modest apartment in Seoul, Elena's father sat frozen. His vision blurred, not from tears falling out, but from tears held painfully within. Then came the first hashtag. Hashtag Glass Vault Mistake. Beatrix Langford let out a delighted laugh as she read one comment aloud. Probably a mirror cleaning staffer who got lost. Marcus Hill, a fund manager from London, raised his glass and flicked it toward Elena. Mind grabbing me a napkin, darling? You look the part. Laughter. Phones. Flash. Someone casually posted, "A Glass Vault official, please recheck your guest list. She's dragging down the standards of this event." And then came the peak of humiliation from the woman running the event herself. Celeste Worthington, chairwoman of Worthington Holdings, appeared in the center of the room like a queen descending from her throne. In a sapphire-studded gown worth over $120,000, with a flawless blue diamond resting at her throat, she spoke. How unfortunate. This table is reserved for those bearing the names Worthington, Morgan, Langford, not for anyone whose name doesn't appear in history. The room erupted in laughter. She tilted her head and smirked. Or better yet, joined the floor crew. That might be a better fit. Elena said nothing, but her hand tightened slightly on the white sash around her waist. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She stood still, a statue amidst the icy fire of collective contempt. Back in Seoul, the screen trembled from her father's now uncontrollable hands. Each word they hurled tore deeper into him. And across the globe, within the private network of that internal live stream, a strange hush began to spread. Some viewers stopped laughing. Some felt a sting in their chest. Is no one going to defend her? Who is she to still have such calm in her eyes? But it was in this very moment, the one where Elena seemed at her most fragile, that everything was about to turn. Just as Celeste Worthington turned her back to leave the central table, a faint chorus of vibrating phones began to ripple across the room, like an alarm signal only the truly powerful could perceive. A dark, gray-suited assistant, Bluetooth earpiece in place, moved swiftly between tables, whispering under his breath, "Mr. Michael D. Abrams has arrived, and he's carrying the will." Celeste's once proud face began to lose its color. No one in the grand hall realized Elena had never left her seat. Despite the ridicule, the dismissals, the silent commands to retreat, she remained. Still, no defense, no defiance. Back in Seoul, her father, Henry Morgan, was gasping for breath. His hands clenched the table's edge, his eyes no longer clouded by pain, but lit by a flicker of hope piercing through the darkness. Then the eastern side door opened. A middle-aged man entered, wearing a high-collared gray suit, carrying a sealed envelope and a thin stack of documents. No need for an introduction. The moment the board members locked eyes with him, it was clear this was no ordinary guest. Apologies for the interruption. I'm Michael D. Abrams, the final legal representative of the late Chairman Edgar Morgan, and by the authority of the will's execution, I hereby summon the full board of Morgan Trust to assemble immediately. The room fell silent, as if a funeral procession had begun. Beatrix Langford dropped her wine glass. Marcus Hill glanced frantically around for an exit. Celeste couldn't take her eyes off the envelope in the lawyer's hand. A guest whispered, "The will? I thought it was disclosed years ago." Michael paused. He turned toward the central table, the only place where someone still sat calmly, as if everything had been orchestrated from the very beginning. And the air is present in this room. In that instant, the entire ballroom turned its heads. Their gaze fell upon Elena, no longer with contempt, but with fear. Who is she? And why hasn't she blinked? The air was heavy as lead. In the hall that once echoed with laughter, only the sound of a seal tearing open rang out, like thunder pressed against the chest. Michael D. Abrams unfolded the document. His voice rang out clear and unwavering. According to the final will, signed and lawfully executed by Edgar Morgan, founder and late chairman of Morgan Trust, all shares, executive authority, financial assets, real estate, and veto power shall be transferred to... He paused, lifted his head, and looked straight at the only person in the entire ballroom who wasn't panicking, Elena. To Elena Morgan Lee, the legal and sole granddaughter of Edgar Morgan. A shockwave exploded across the room. Gasps. Phones dropped to the floor. Red wine spilled across the tabletops. Celeste Worthington took a step back, her mouth open, but no sound came out. Impossible. No, she's the daughter of Henry Morgan, the one the family disowned. Michael nodded, producing a DNA test certified by 3 independent medical institutions. Henry Morgan was cut from the inheritance for refusing to abandon the love of his life, a Korean schoolteacher, Elena's mother. But Edgar Morgan never forgot. That single page, just one sheet, was a blade slicing through every illusion of power in the room. Elena remained seated, but the entire world seemed to orbit around her now. From across the globe, Henry Morgan collapsed onto his desk. For the first time in 20 years, he cried. Not from shame, but because justice now had a face, and it bore his daughter's name. The internal livestream cameras, once tools of mockery, are now focused on. Every frame captured Elena's calm expression, not one of revenge, but of quiet judgment. The mocking hashtags began to disappear, replaced by a surge of truth. Hashtag Elena Morgan. Hashtag the true heir. Hashtag justice in silk. And when Michael declared the final line, the will is effective immediately. All current board members are hereby dismissed. Assets in full control are transferred to Miss Elena Morgan Lee. The hall erupted, but not in cheers. It erupted in the collapse of reputations, fortunes, and arrogance. No one had yet recovered from the shock when Hans Riedel stepped forward. His charcoal suit was sculpted like armor, his gaze so cold it could melt diamonds. He didn't need an introduction. Everyone knew. This was the man who controlled nearly $400 billion through investment fund across Europe, the Middle East, and North America. He took out his phone, his voice sharp as steel. I'm Hans Riedel, chairman of Riedel Capital, and I'm here not only as Elena's ally, but as the primary verifier of the largest financial transfer in Morgan Trust history. Celeste Worthington trembled. Hans, this can't be. Hans cut her off, his eyes fixed on Beatrix Langford, Marcus Hill, and Sylvia Vaughn, the very people who had mocked Elena just moments earlier. All partnership contracts, investment funds, and capital flows with Langford Enterprises, Hill Holdings, and Vaughn Media are terminated immediately. He raised his phone, revealing a string of emails. Termination confirmed. I don't invest in those who ridicule the rightful heir of Morgan. The room convulsed. Beatrix Langford, the one who mocked the satin dress, collapsed into her seat, as pale as someone drained of blood. No, I still have contracts with Japanese banks. I need time. Hans turned to Elena, as if asking permission, then faced Celeste once more. You enjoy humiliating people? Good. Today, that very mouth just destroyed your future. Social media erupted. Hashtag Elena Strikes Back. Hashtag Hans Justice. Hashtag Legacy Over Labels. The financial indices of Langford Enterprises and Vaughn Media began a freefall, all within the first 30 minutes after the livestream ended. The former Morgan Trust Board, those who had once cast Henry Morgan out, were permanently banned from any investment decision within the Riedel Capital ecosystem. No one cried. No one screamed. There was only a terrible silence as the elite realized they had no power left. And amid the chaos, only one person stood still, needing no revenge, no spectacle. Elena simply watched, softly, but that gaze was judgment. 1 minute. 2. No one spoke, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't dare. Every eye in the room turned to a single figure. Elena Morgan Lee, the woman once dismissed, mocked, and cast out like a blemish in a ballroom of brilliance. Now, her gaze was unchanged, still calm, still quiet, like a lake before the storm. But from that stillness radiated a pressure heavy as stone. This was the woman they would now call chairwoman. Elena rose. For the first time all evening, her steps were not met with scrutiny, but with reverent awe. She did not look at Beatrix. She didn't glance at Celeste. She didn't even acknowledge Marcus, those who once stood atop the world. She walked to the center of the hall. The lights automatically shifted, casting their glow on her. The live stream followed her every movement. And then, for the first time, Elena spoke. Her voice was not loud, not sharp, but each word sank into the bones of those who had once laughed at her shame. I don't need to wear diamonds to know my worth. A sigh escaped from somewhere, as if someone had been struck in the most tender part of their pride. I didn't need a name to walk into this room, but it's a shame. You needed me to keep your seat at the table. Celeste trembled. Marcus gripped his chair. Beatrix looked up, but couldn't meet her eyes. Today, you've taught me something, that self-respect still holds value in a room full of reputation. And in return, I give you something as well, an ending. The ballroom was silent, as if her words were the final arrow, piercing straight into the hearts of those who once laughed. But Elena didn't step away from the mic. I won't fire anyone tonight. I don't need to. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the hall. Because when the lights dim, your hollow reputations will expose themselves. And I'll be the only one left standing. Not because I'm a Morgan, but because I am myself. And in that moment, the entire ballroom rose to their feet. Not a single person clapped. They simply stood like a silent ritual of surrender. Hans Riedel gave a subtle nod. The global live stream exploded. Hashtag Elena rules. Hashtag the air speaks. Hashtag not just Morgan, she's herself. The room that had once been packed with laughter, mockery, and arrogant stares was now quiet as an empty chapel. No one dared move. No one dared lift their head. And the only person walking out was the one who had once been treated as if she had no right to be there, Elena Morgan Lee. The satin dress bore no label. The worn-out flats. The low-tied hair. Nothing had changed. But what made the entire ballroom hold its breath was the presence in every step she took. No escorts. No applause. No spotlight. And she didn't need them. Because she didn't walk out as a victor, she walked out as someone who no longer had anything to prove. Behind her, those who had laughed could only bow their heads. The waiter who once redirected her to the staff entrance now slipped quietly into the background, avoiding all eyes. Celeste Worthington sat frozen, the notion of partying now meaningless. Beatrix Langford gripped her phone, its screen flashing with alerts of withdrawn capital and plummeting stocks. The rows of the world's wealthiest now resembled a silent courtroom, where every verdict had already been delivered by nothing more than Elena's presence. The live stream exploded, but global viewers weren't talking about Genevieve or about the humiliation. They were talking about a simple woman who made the elite bow their heads. The comments poured in. She didn't retaliate. She just stood still. Worth isn't stitched into your collar. It's in your poise when they push you to the lowest seat. I was once Ava. I was once Elena. And today, I saw myself in her. And in Seoul, in a small, dim room, an old man finally cried after a lifetime of holding it in. Henry Morgan, the disowned father, had lived long enough to see his daughter restore honor to them both. Not with money, not with power, but with the way she walked through a storm without letting it stain her dress. And then, at the great doorway, Elena paused. She didn't look back. She simply lifted her eyes to the night sky, a sky where the light behind her no longer outshone her own. She had entered that room alone, dismissed, misjudged, reduced by appearances, and she left with something no one could ever buy, her dignity intact, not because she carried the Morgan name, but because she had never once abandoned herself. That day, the world didn't just witness an heir to wealth. They witnessed an heir to character, a woman who redefined what legacy truly means. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't a corporation. It was the justice she reclaimed, not through power, but through grace amid chaos. And as the doors closed behind Elena, the world understood one thing. The one they once looked down on is now the one they all follow. Many people in that room might take years to understand why they failed. But you and I, we knew the answer in a single moment. They failed because they believed a person's worth was measured by the watch on their wrist, the brand stitched into their dress, or the surname printed on a golden invitation. But Elena Morgan Lee showed them, and the entire world, a truth both raw and unshakable. True worth is not in what you wear, but in how you rise when you've been pushed to your lowest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back. She didn't shed a single tear in front of them. She just walked, step by step, calm, composed, and never forgetting who she was. And that very composure became a mirror, reflecting the room for what it truly was, a place glittering with gold, but starved of character. Have you ever been underestimated because of your simple appearance? Ever been rejected because you didn't belong? Ever sat in a crowded room and still felt invisible? If so, then this story is for you. Elena is not a fictional heroine. Elena is a symbol for all those who were silenced, pushed aside, and dismissed. And yet, they chose to hold on to their dignity, even when no one cheered for them, even when no one stood up to defend them. And someday, the world will have no choice but to stop and listen. This story isn't just about justice. It's about how you treat yourself when the world tries to diminish you. Don't rush to prove anything. Don't panic to be heard. Do what Elena did. Be still, be steady, and wait. Wait for the moment when the light will shine through and reveal who is real gold and who is just gold-plated. I believe people like Elena Morgan Lee are not just characters in stories. They're out there, working in diners, guarding doors at gala halls, raising children, studying, surviving on street corners no one pays attention to. And someday, they'll rise, not to seek revenge, but to remind the world. True worth never needs permission to be recognized. And if you're carrying a story no one knows yet, if you stayed quiet for far too long, if you still believe in kindness, inner pride, and unwavering grace, keep walking, because you're not alone. Because every video on this channel, Toch Story, is our shared voice, telling the truths the world forgot. That dignity, kindness, and persistence are still the most precious crowns of all. Leave your comment below. Share this story with someone who needs a reason to believe in themselves again. And subscribe to Toch Story today, not to chase a trend, but to make sure you never miss a moment that touches the soul. Because sometimes the quietest one in a room is the only one powerful enough to make the world rise.